Hey guys, this is Eckhart's Letter. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Legends / Canon lore video. And today specifically, we will be comparing the two Star Wars continuities and examining the difference between clone troopers. Now, the next few days are going to be pretty crazy with episode 9 coming out, another episode of The Mandalorian, and everything else. So just be cognizant of that and know, of course, that in the new year, uploads will return to normal. Anyway, although there are certainly thousands of minute differences between Legend and Canon clones, I've identified 5 fairly major ones for today's video. Many have to do with the cloning process itself, but others have to do with clone training or how clones were used during and after the war. And I think the most drastic difference between clones in Legends and Canon is the presence of the inhibitor chip. Now, Canon, largely framed of course by the Clone Wars cartoon, has taken the approach that clones were totally devoid of free will, at least when it came to Order 66. The inhibitor chip, or the control chip inside of their brain, forced them to carry out the Emperor's orders unless of course they were removed beforehand. However, when we move to Legends, although the content from the Clone Wars itself is canon, the majority of other works, including for example the Revenge of the Sith novel, Dark Lord, The Rise of Lord Vader, and more, essentially paint the clones as willing participants. Admittedly, some did regret turning on the Jedi, who they had by now followed into battle countless times, but nonetheless, they were ultimately loyal. Here's a quote from Episode 3's novelization. Cody was a clone. He would execute the order faithfully, without hesitation or regret. But he was also human enough to mutter glumly, would it have been too much to ask for the order to have come through before I gave him back the bloody lightsaber? Other clones, and particularly commandos or other special forces units which had more free will, outright disobeyed Order 66, believing that it was not in the best interest of the Republic. An example of this would be Ion Team. Personally, I prefer the idea that the clones just had to listen to the order because it was within their biological programming rather than some sort of inhibitor chip, but I understand why New Canon has leaned into that approach given the way that clones were humanized during the Clone Wars cartoon. The next change I want to talk about can be tied directly to Jango Fett. In Legends, Jango Fett was a Mandalorian, and in canon, he was not. Why this is important is because in Legends, Jango Fett specifically had a group of Mandalorians help to train the Grand Army of the Republic. Specifically, there was the Kaival Dar, which was a group of 100, mostly made up of Mandalorians, which heavily impacted clone training and helped make the army an elite force. In canon, it seemed like most of clone training was performed on Kamino, with a combination of flash training, which is when they have those things on their head, with a combination of practical training, of course, later on. Just generally though, for better or for worse, the clone army in canon doesn't have the same Mandalorian flair and background that the one in Legends did. The next 3 points that I want to discuss are actually all interconnected and talk about the process and history of cloning itself. There's of course much more information about cloning in Legends given the fact that the universe existed for much longer. However, there's also an inherent issue in the fact that much of this lore was actually created before the prequels. Books like the Thrawn trilogy, for example, talk about a clone war which was completely different than what we actually got, and which saw clones assaulting the galaxy as ordered by insane clone masters. That book introduces something called Sparti cloning, which was a distinct method of cloning from that used on Kamino. And even post-prequel era, Legends actually introduced several other cloning methods. In fact, although Kamino clones remain the backbone of the Republic's military, the Republic Commando books actually revealed that Palpatine was supplementing the GAR with clones produced through other methods, which, as I've discussed in prior videos, were almost always inferior soldiers. In canon, it appears that all clones used by the Republic were made on Kamino, which does make the mid-war ordering of more clones as an urgent issue kind of confusing, given the fact that clones are supposed to take 10 years to grow. But anyway, related to that point is my next one, which is clone templates. In canon, so far as we know, the Republic used only one clone template in their army, Jango Fett, of course. Basically, all soldiers under the mask were based on Jango's genetics. However, as with cloning methods, this wasn't true in Legends. Although the majority of clones were based on Jango, as the war progressed, the Republic introduced other clone templates for specialized positions, like starfighter pilots. This would be a practice carried on into the Imperial era. Well-performing troops of the Empire were encouraged to submit themselves for cloning, which to me does make sense. Although Jango Fett is basically superhuman and perhaps he's a really good template to train additional skills on, why would you have your frontline soldier be the same clone as the one driving your tanks, or operating the machinery on your capital ships, or piloting your starfighters? To me, it makes sense to have perhaps a few dozen different clone varieties, which is exactly what Grand Admiral Thrawn did during his campaign. But that actually takes us to one of the final major differences, and this is one that anyone who's played Jedi Fallen Order may or may not realize. In Legends, the clones remained a vital part of the Imperial Stormtrooper Corps, and truly the military as a whole, until the Battle of Yavin and beyond. Although their role did diminish as the Empire lost control of Kamino, and they eventually had enough planets and draftees to make a standing army of ordinary organics. However, in canon, by 5 years after Revenge of the Sith, the clones have been completely removed from the army. I'm not sure why. It may have had to do with Kamino not agreeing to make further Stormtrooper clones, but personally I guess it does fit well within my headcanon. I never thought of Stormtroopers as clones when I watched the original trilogy, and I don't now, so I guess it makes sense to me. So I personally always had a difficult time reconciling that bit of lore. Those have been the 5 ways that clones in Legends are far different than the ones we have now in canon. And just to summarize, we have the reliance, or lack thereof, of an inhibitor chip. We have clones being used by the Empire after the war in Legends but not canon. We have different clone templates in Legends but not canon. And we have other cloning methods in Legends but not canon. So I hope you guys found this video useful. If there's something you'd like me to cover in the future, make sure to leave it down below. And if there's an idea you like, drop it a thumbs up. Anyway, that's all for today's video. Until next time, guys, have a great one. And as always, may the Force be with you.